Well, good morning. Welcome to When Opinions Collide. My name is Jonathan Fiala, your host, and today we'll be doing another editorial on this. I'm hoping in the next few weeks we'll go ahead and get our pro-vax pediatrician and anti-vax biologist lawyer back in, talk about some of the interesting happenings that have been going on in our country and the new vaccine. And what does it mean coming into this new term? Should Biden indeed take the White House? What's going to happen, and what does that vaccine look like? Well, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the interesting stuff that's been going on, and I'll try to build a case today of why this vaccine is such an interesting animal in its origin and what it means politically and on a physical health level as well. So, the vaccine was out of China. That's not in dispute. Came out of a province, Wuhan. Came out of a factory that creates and builds bioterror organisms. And viruses. That's their thing. It is a biolab in Wuhan. Something that they've been working on the vaccine actually to COVID type viruses the last 5-10 years. This is not in dispute. Dr. Anthony Fauci was over there, as we talked about in May. We did a show on that. Talked about how Fauci had been over there developing the vaccine, has a patent on that said vaccine, something that was rushed existence by the Pfizer, all these other organizations. By the way, for those of you who are pro-life out there with the vaccine, not all, but most of these are derivative in some factor for function from aborted fetal tissue. Interesting point of note there. If you think that that's immoral, take that as you will. But all that to say, this vaccine has actually been prepped a long time before now. That's how it was able to come out so quickly. But why? Why was there a vaccine being produced, and why was this virus released? Was it an accident? Well, there are folks who've said that it wasn't an accident, and some of those folks aren't around anymore. There are certain scientists and political operatives out of China who've blown the whistle, and they're nowhere to be found. So how does that relate to this push for the vaccine? Well, it's very interesting. Let me go ahead and run back real quick. We'll talk about the election here in the States and how I think it's actually connected. It is a very, very interesting web to weave here, but let me see if I can do that in this 1-hour segment. There's an article on the Epoch Times where they interview a Patrick Byrne, former CEO of Overstock.com, and an entrepreneur, and also a guy who's been involved in a lot of the investigation on the fraud of the 2020 election, some of the question marks that have been raised. He's been working on this for since August, a few months, and they were breaking down these machines, these Dominion and SmartTech machines, since August, and they were looking at where they came from and how they were produced. So, where did they ultimately originate? Well, it's interesting. SmartTech comes through a Panamanian division of a software development company, but it also comes through Venezuela. Well, Venezuela is indeed one of the Western Hemisphere surrogates for China. Communist activity in Venezuela, there is no doubt that Venezuela is a satellite, I wouldn't call it a satellite state, but a satellite sphere of influence for the Chinese Communist Party. Dominion voting systems was designed with backdoors. They were designed so that you could, one operator at any given control interface could actually delete, add via thumb drive any number of votes. They could manage and change them from certain hard points in the electoral system. Very interesting. Curious as to why that system was used in our elections for, I believe, 30 states. Very interesting. Another interesting thought to look at is this from the Center for Security Policy. South Korea had another interesting election this year. And I'll come back to the United States election in a moment. You'll see why it's relevant. In the April 2020 election in South Korea, there's substantive evidence of fraud. And President Moon Jae-in over in South Korea, the gentleman who did in fact win the nomination and now has a majority in parliament, 180. By the way, exactly the number of parliament seats that they said that they would have filled. Interesting. Moon Jae-in and the leftist party in South Korea signed an agreement with the Communist Party of China before the election. Interesting. And they won the election through fraud. By all accounts, by all measures that we can see, it appears to be rigged. And if you want to go to look this up on the Center for Security Policy.org, fraud in South Korea's April 2020 election. They have links to the research and the data there. Not going to cover that here. Now, back to that Epoch Times article. We see China moving very methodically, and it's been hard to piece together, but it appears that between the confusion with the election, with the Chinese Communist Party virus, and also the Chinese Communist Party vaccine that appears to be being produced here, through research from Dr. Fauci and actually the Obama administration paying a good amount of money into this vaccine. We have this one article from the Gateway Pundit. This was back in April they reported on this, but Fauci and the Obama administration gave Wuhan, the lab in Wuhan, $3.7 million after Dr. Xi, goodness, I'm going to butcher this name, Dingley, had a U.S. project shut down and she was sent back to China. So they sent money back with her to China to finish that. So why would the Democrat Party be interested in work on this virus and the vaccine for this virus all the way back in 2015? Well, that's an interesting question. Why would the leftist party in South Korea sign an agreement with the Chinese Communist Party, China? Well, China's been working on something for quite a few years. They call it the Assassin's Mace. This is, I'm quoting this out of the Epoch Times article with Patrick Byrne. It's been hard to figure out what this this Assassin's Mace would be, but they believed that it would be the one-punch kill for the American government, for the American system. It was China's plan to effectively remove the U.S. from their path to being a global dominating nation. They want to be the world's superpower. They always have. So, between this coronavirus, again, released from China, vaccine data coming from China, all of this moving from China, with a candidate who has been compromised by China, someone who has been involved in billion-dollar deals while he was vice president, peddling influence. Interesting. Now, through this election fraud system where we see in one state alone 700,000 votes, mail-in votes received more than were sent out. They don't just hand these out. They can't be procured through any normal means other than through mail. So if 1.8 million votes were sent out in Pennsylvania, you should only get at most 1.8 million back. That's how it works. Instead, they received, or they counted at least, 2.5 million. Those are the states of Pennsylvania. That's the state of Pennsylvania's numbers, not mine. And a lot of this data and information that's coming in links back to either Dominion voting or Chinese Communist Party operatives on our soil. So I need to mention Eric Swalwell, the guy who was being bedded down by a Chinese operative for years. By the way, he'd been read in on that in 2015, and he was going in on El Presidente Trump for Russia collusion when he himself had been compromised by a Chinese operative for years. But I find that interesting. I find that interesting that we have this miasma of corruption and complicity with the Chinese Communist Party, and they're the ones who released the virus. And other nations, some of our allies, are now having leading members of their party sign agreements with Chinese Communist Party. Very interesting. Now, for those who think that this election was fair, no need to look closer, no need to kind of just at least verify, at least look at the fail-safes that we were promised that we would look at. We spent 4 years hearing about Russia collusion. Russia collusion, that whole narrative came from something they called the Steele dossier. That was the original subject matter material. Steele dossier was procured from a British spy who was quoting, actually misquoting, by that Russian spy's own narrative, a Russian spy. Igor Danchenko was the original sub-source. The way these sources work is you have a source, you have a sub-source. If the source does not have original knowledge and they are hearing it through a secondary party, they call it a sub-source. That sub-source, Igor Danchenko, actually told the FBI, what Christopher Steele wrote in the dossier wasn't even what I said. So, that lends the question, who was Christopher Steele working for in procuring this lie about Russian prostitutes peeing on furniture of the president or whatever it was? Well, that was ultimately paid for by the Democratic Party, by the DNC and Hillary Clinton, through the efforts of Bruce Ohr and Nellie Ohr. But that's another conversation for a different time. With that said, when we come back from the break in just a minute, we're going to talk about a little bit of what's been going on in the Senate hearings and some of the evidence that's been produced about the election fraud and how it ties in to the coronavirus pandemic, the vaccine. I hope you'll join us on the other side of this break. We'll be hearing a quick word from our sponsors. Thank you so much. I'll see you on the other side.
The Natural Nation Network is really about taking control of your health physically, spiritually, emotionally, even intellectually, because there's so much out there in misinformation. There's a lot of people now that are suffering from all sorts of diseases that they really wouldn't have to suffer for if they had better information. And that's what we're here to do. Provide information that can save lives.
The mind and the body are totally connected.
Health can be really serious, and sometimes we just have to lighten it up a little bit while we're still providing substantive information.
And my sort of mantra on the salsa dance floor is kind of similar. I tell somebody, if you make a mistake twice, it becomes a move. Okay?
Tune into Natural Nation every Tuesday at 11 a.m.
And welcome back. Once again, I'm your host, Jonathan Fiala. Thank you for tuning in to this editorial edition of When Opinions Collide. Normally on this show, I'm a moderator as much as possible. I like to get two people on and we kind of debate the idea, right? We have a discussion about what's going on and I try to arbitrate neutrally. However, this whole situation with China and the coronavirus, the election, very interesting what's going on, and I really think we are headed for some crazy times if the Chinese get their way. I love the Chinese people. Okay, let me clear. I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party when I say the Chinese, and I'll try to refer to them as the CCP. Okay, Chinese Communist Party, because Chinese Communist Party is a mouthful. But the CCP is very, very interested in not only claiming the title of superpower, but they also want to more or less control the world. They've been very open about this. It's not some sort of secret. With that said, they've been at it like crazy this last year. They released this horrible COVID-19 on the world. We've seen all of these shutdowns, draconian policies put in place, a lot like Chinese Communist Party did in China. And for what? This virus is a real thing. It does infect people. It does cause respiratory issues. And my family knows people who've died supposedly from COVID. With that said, of the 200-something, 300,000 people who've died from CV-19 or COVID-19, you're looking at 6% who were exclusively COVID deaths, what they were actually set up as. The rest of them had comorbidities. And as the show that was previously on Ninja Talks, they were talking about comorbidities and what that means. The fact of the matter is, last year, as I said on Ninja Talks, good show, tune in. You can go back if you want. Look it up on our Facebook and YouTube. But as they said there, you have, I think it's 54,000 who had upper respiratory issues. You had all sorts of these other issues, but 60,000 died last year of the flu alone, and we don't have any counted flu deaths. I know people who've gotten the coronavirus. Like I said, we've known some people who've died from that. But most of the people that I know who've gotten it, it was nothing more than a bad case of the flu. Some of them lost their taste and had a sniffle for a few days. A lot of it is in preparation and preparing your body for the COVID attack involves zinc, vitamin D, those things. This conversation has been prevented from occurring, though, where we talk about prophylactic action, preventative action with medication, because the vaccine is the interest here. Vaccine is the push, because there's money to be made. It's not necessarily some people in our government maniacally cackling saying that they're going to hand this over to the Chinese. They have money to make. That's what they're going to do. They're going to make money. And normally I'm all about making the Benjamins. That's a great thing. But when you're actually doing it at the cost of Americans, I take an issue there. If you take zinc and vitamin D, by the way, that's the only thing hydroxychloroquine is for, is to up the pH and allow the cells to be able to take in the zinc. Okay, that's the whole purpose of it. They say taking hydroxychloroquine is bad for your heart. Yeah, if you take it in the 2,400 milligram dose, literally one order of magnitude more than what the recommended heavy prescription is, yeah, anything will do that. Crestor, any of those things will give you heart palpitations. If you take a 2,400 milligram dose, that's like taking 10 pills in one shot. Yeah, you're going to have issues. That's the problem. There's no intellectual honesty when it comes to this virus because it's been politicized for either money or power. Just like the election process has been politicized for money or for power. It shouldn't matter which party wins or loses in the long term. In the grand scheme of things, if you have checks and balances, if you are able to audit the process afterward and say, you know what, so-and-so won fair and square, we move on. That's how this election system works. Everyone had one vote, one voice, appropriately checked. That's good to go. But in a Senate hearing yesterday, I believe it was, I watched a good part of it, they actually held a hearing on the irregularities in the election. Senator Ron Johnson presided. He had people come and present evidence, people from Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and the man from Nevada, Jesse Binnall, actually brought facts and evidence to the court, if you will, to the Senate hearing, and this was done under oath. Not only was it done under oath, but these records are public. I've looked at them myself, and he's correct. These are accurate. I've gone through the spreadsheets. You can take this data, and if you're a computer whiz, I am not, you could go ahead and compile it into an Excel spreadsheet, and you can actually come up with all of the abnormalities. I've viewed quite a few of these over the past few weeks. Let me go ahead and just run a couple of the numbers from Jesse Binnall's testimony. I talked about Pennsylvania, Michigan, and I believe a little bit of Georgia last week. Let me talk about Nevada for a moment. 42,000 people voted more than once in Nevada. That's a fact. That is proven data. We're talking same voter ID. We are looking at 19,000 people voted even though they didn't live in Nevada. 1,500 people who were dead voted in Nevada. This all totaled up with other discrepancies. In some cases, we have people who voted 4 times. Okay, I've gone through these records myself and looked at them. We've had people who voted 4 times, same voter ID. Okay, it's not just the same person with the same name. You might think that. I thought that too. The same voter ID, voted 4 times. There's a minimum of 130,000 instances of voter fraud in Nevada. Stop, pump the brakes. If you want America to remain free, if you want the will of the people to remain free, Republican, Democrat, does not matter. Whoever is pushing these instances of fraud, whoever is at the bottom of this, we need to remove that fraud. We need to prosecute the individuals who are pushing that fraud. Because at the end of the day, like we saw in South Korea, it's much more overt there. But the Chinese Communist Party is at work in this through many of their surrogates. We actually have been closing down Chinese embassies here in the States because, unfortunately, as much as we would like to have good relations with everyone, including the people who say that America is enemy number one, as per them saying America is enemy number one, they've been running spies through their embassies, and they've been running active operations through our embassies that we have allowed them to have on our soil. And it's not like they haven't treated us any better. Our embassies in China have been attacked where they've had permanent brain damage done to our ambassadors. We've done nothing. They've attacked us on what was an embassy is considered sovereign soil of the nation that is sending that embassy. They've attacked us on our embassies in China, and we've still sat there. We have definitely tried to be the better neighbor. But through Dominion, through Smart Tech, and through these other voting systems, we've actually seen a large change in the number of votes, the way it goes, the way these fall. And people are tired of the lockdown. In fact, there's evidence to suggest that even California voted against the lockdowns. They didn't vote for Trump's rhetoric. They voted for no more lockdowns. We're tired of this. They didn't vote because they thought Trump was a nice guy. By the way, most Republicans did not vote for Trump because he was a nice guy. He's a New York Democrat. In fact, most Republicans really thought he was kind of a bit of a dirtbag most of his life. His tenor is difficult to take sometimes. But the way the guy is actually pushed against people like the Chinese Communist Party, the way he's actually pushed against Iran. By the way, something you're not hearing in the news, actually the Middle East is coming together. We're seeing peace treaties across the board. The fire, the flaming dumpster fire that was the Obama-Biden foreign policy in the Middle East, in 4 years, Trump somehow managed, and his administration, by the way, I put this largely on his administration, and his willingness to put people in charge who are doing that work. Again, I think Trump's more of a gut-level reactionary guy. The Middle East is actually at peace, something that hasn't been so decades, maybe even centuries. Seeing unparalleled peace. But, and China has been seeing its aggression be put in place. But right now, we have a guy who's beholden to China going into office right now. Who's going to push the COVID-19 vaccine. Going to push the COVID lockdowns until 2022. We'll talk about that more later, right after this break. Thank you once again. This has been When Opinions Collide. I'm your host, Jonathan Fiala. I'll see you guys on the other side of the break.
We work our whole lives to support our families. With one accident or illness, it can all be gone in an instant. Now there's a smart, affordable way to protect your family. Go to findhealthbenefits.com and discover low-cost life insurance for as little as $2 per month. Add to that a tax-deferred annuity that can help you protect your assets and grow your money for retirement. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com or call 877-235-6094. A critical illness can strike without warning and wipe out your life savings. In fact, it's the #1 reason for bankruptcy. Find Health Benefits offers an affordable solution. Get up to $50,000 if you get cancer, stroke, or a heart attack, giving you the peace of mind to focus on getting better while the plan helps you to pay your bills and medical expenses. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com or call 877-235-6094. 66% of seniors spend more time shopping for cable TV than Medicare plans. Most say because it's just too confusing. Laws change every year. The wrong plan could cost you thousands and prevent you from seeing the doctors you want. Introducing FindHealthBenefits.com. Save time, save money, see specialists without referrals. Go to FindHealthBenefits.com or call 877-235-6094 for this informative brochure.
Society is on the edge. Let's bring them back. Edge Radio, because truth still matters.
And welcome back. This is When Opinions Collide. I'm your host, Arthur Fiala, and now joining me is Oscar Hines. How are you, sir?
I am doing fantastic, Jonathan. How are you?
Doing well. I'm glad to have you on.
Man, you've had some really interesting commentary so far. This is fascinating stuff.
Well, it's an interesting set of times we live in. I mean, if it weren't so serious, I'd be breaking out the popcorn and laughing all the way. But the problem is there are people who are dying.
Yeah.
There is stuff. There are a lot of things at stake, and I really think our liberties are on the line here. What we're seeing with this pandemic, so to speak, is a loss of not only our liberties, but also we might be losing our state of power in the world as a nation, which is very bad when you have actors like China who release this virus, now say they have a vaccine they want to give us. And
yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah. So according to what you were saying, China is one of the architects of the vaccine.
Correct.
And they also were unfortunately the progenitor of the virus to begin with. But what about this idea that we had this Harvard trained scholar that was part of sort of the development or initial development, according to what they were saying? He was terminated from Harvard Medical, and then there was this other physician that went back to China with the virus supposedly. So the virus was developed in South Carolina or something, and then went back. Have you heard about all this?
Yeah, I was actually talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
I've got her name. I butchered it earlier, and I apologize. I will butcher it again. But then again, she is a Chinese communist, so my sympathy's low. Dr. Xi, it's a Zhengli.
Zhengli, okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
Was sent over by the Obama administration with Fauci with $3.7 million back to Wuhan.
Yes.
So very, very interesting. I have to say, the way this virus has been politicized, we talked about the statistics earlier, where if you look at actual people who died of just COVID, the claim is just COVID, we're looking at 20 or 30,000 people. 60,000 people died of the flu last year. It's very interesting. I believe the virus is real. I mean, I sell test kits for this.
Yeah.
And you know, believe me, I'm in a part of my other profession is I am in the medical supply community. I do a lot of that, and virus is real.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible thing, but guess what? It's here to stay.
Yeah.
And do we really want to wait till 2022 to open up again? That's going to cripple the U.S. economy. And while the U.S. economy is suppressed, guess who's been having a quarter four all year long?
Oh man,
Amazon. Where does all their produce come from?
That's a Chinese.
China. Guess who's making all the money?
Yeah.
China, ultimately. Yeah. And by the way, for those of you who are excited about sticking it to the billionaires and the trillionaires and the 1% on the 1%. Bernie shtick, why are you siding on the same side as Bezos, Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, these multi-billionaires who are worth really, I mean, you really want to talk about future worth, we're talking trillionaires.
Oh, yeah.
And influence.
It's going to come to that point easily. Yeah.
They're all on the side of Biden. They want you to be locked in your house because they want to suppress you.
Yeah. So the suppression, according to what you're thinking, John Arthur, is predicated on this notion that if we have a lockdown, if we shut down economies, if we no longer have brick and mortar, we're going to move to a virtual society. The virtual society is currently being fed by the Amazons of the world, all of whom are being supplied by China in what is now the premier supply chain on the planet is China. You can get a car built from a transmission to tires to batteries to belts, all from China. So they have this ability to create these things.
Correct. And the way it's going to go, by the way, I sell on Amazon. This is great for people like me.
Yeah.
But you know what? The actual brick and mortar people, the Americans that are trying to get up and get ahead, the whole purpose, the whole thing of cultural Marxism, the disease that is cultural Marxism, it infests our social life, and then it affects the economy, right? One of the things that the Republican Party gets very wrong. That's why I say I'm a conservative. I'm not a Republican. I'm a Christian first, who happens to lean towards conserving the liberal values of the founding of the United States.
Yeah.
The United States was founded on the liberal value of live, let live, government out of my hair, stay out, leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
And all men were created equal. If you look at the original Declaration of Independence, as Jefferson wrote it, it actually charged King James with even allowing slavery in the first place.
Mm.
Because the crown has allowed slavery this whole time.
Yes.
And that is the biggest affront to the Christian moral ethic. He had to take that out because the southern states wouldn't play ball, and they were under threat of active destruction from Great Britain.
And then he went ahead and he owned some slaves himself.
Oh no, he had that the whole time.
Yeah.
But the thing was, it's one of those things where I don't agree with it, but I buy stuff from China today. So
Mm-hmm.
I tell people who get mad, say you're white, whites own slaves. I'm like, well, you can save your ire when you don't buy anything from Nike, McDonald's,
There you go.
Walmart, or Amazon.
That's right.
All we did is remove the slave trade offhand. And by the way, that's why the Democratic Party is so hot. They always have been hot on moving the commerce to China because it's cheap.
Yeah.
It's cheap on the blood and sweat of the Chinese people and people like the Uyghurs.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard about the
The
Uyghurs.
Uyghurs, yeah.
The Uyghur Muslims in China who've
Right.
been enslaved in millions.
And their human rights have been violated for many, many moons, and America has turned a blind eye to all of those folks, unfortunately. I guess the really sad, unfortunate thing about what you're saying is it's true, but I just find that there's a lot of hypocrisy in this country, like this whole notion that China is the enemy. According to what some people have said, China's really been a secret ally to some of the elites from
Absolutely.
the beginning, because if you look at the Walmarts of the world, Walmart is the number one reason that China has the kind of wealth it has right now.
By the way, look at Walmart. That's a great case study.
Yeah.
It's a great case study. Walmart is an awesome one because you had a conservative founder, Sam Walton.
Mm-hmm.
His claim was 90% of what is sold at Walmart is what? American made.
Right.
His kids
Mm-hmm.
were leftists,
Mm-hmm.
bought the company, and what do?
Yeah.
Drop that like a hot potato, because you know what? It's cheaper to make money off slave trade.
Yeah.
At least that's the thought. It's not actually true. Slave ownership is actually more expensive to the owner than it is to just allow them to be free and make their own way. That's an interesting economic conversation,
Yeah.
because you actually get more wealth when you let people be free. That's why America has worked.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how the math adds up on that. The calculus to something like that suggests to me that if you have free labor, the largest part of any corporation's expenditures are the labor force.
But it's not free. You do not have free labor so let's look at China. China should be busting the bank. They should be blowing out all on their own. They should be a superpower because of the people they have and the potential for ingenuity. But there are two things going on. They have to put so many people on the ground, and this is what happened at the slave plantations too. They had to focus this amount on food growth and food production. But because people aren't incentivized to have ingenuity, to sell, because they're not rewarded for it. Why would I serve my slave owner by coming up with something new? It doesn't comport with human nature, and as well, I don't think it should.
Mm-hmm.
But it costs more to have those people work for food and then to gain from their work than it would be to just let them be free and let them work and then profit off of that. Now, you lose the control as an individual. But if you're, say, like a Bezos, let's talk about Bezos for a moment. You know why he's profited? Because he got people's self-interest to align with his interest, and he pushed to the top.
Mm-hmm.
It would have happened with or without Chinese slave labor. It just would have happened a lot slower.
Yeah.
In some ways, if you actually had the entire Chinese populace, free nation, it would have been faster. But they are one of the largest populations in the world and the largest producer.
Yeah, I don't know. I just can't. I just can't. I'm not seeing the calculus. The idea of housing and feeding people being more expensive than profiting on the labor that is free. To me, that's the reason the Civil War started. You know, the North realized the North were manufacturers and they had to pay people to work in those factories. The South essentially said, screw that. We got all these slaves on these plantations. We're going to run them for free. They're going to live in shacks. They're going to eat pig's feet and crow and chicken legs. You know, all the garbage that the white master didn't want to eat is what black slaves ate. So their consumption was relative, but their production was substantial. It, in fact, created the Southern economy.
Sure.
Most banks, the Barclay Bank and all these foreign banks, are predicated on slave labor. So I'm not seeing the calculus.
So that's a really interesting debate. And I actually kind of want to dig in with this on you. But you and I need to actually do this sometime.
Sure.
But I've got to have the actual statistics in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is, a free economy, as for the whole economy, is actually better than a slave economy. And the opportunity for individuals to rise, not the one individual holding the slaves. I'll definitely concede to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the opportunity for an individual like a Bezos to be produced, only possible with a lot of free interest people working for that one individual in a consensual manner. I've got to pull out those stats, but that's actually, the South was on the decline during the Civil War, partly because they were starting to suffer some decay, because again, slavery is a very corrupting influence. It's very, very bad for a population, not just the slaves, but also the slave owners. Mm-hmm. As all immoral things are, it does actually come back to bite you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's an interesting conversation. I'd love to mix that up. So we've got a break we're up against. We'll go ahead and take that quick break.
Absolutely.
This is When Opinions Collide.
Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you on the other side. Thank you.
Don't push me because I'm close to the edge.
I'm trying not to lose my head.
Hey, this is the Talk About Unity show where I bring the talk.
And I bring the unity.
And together we talk about unity. Unity is what matters.
Come on.
And right now in our country, that's what we've got to do. So we do that here at Talk About Unity on the Edge Radio Network. Be with us every week.
It's going to be awesome. It always is. And I tell you what, the more we seek first to understand, then be understood, we make progress.
And we like to do that. And that's why everybody's on the brink. We love what we do at Edge Radio because everybody's on the edge. We bring them back from the edge and we bring the unity. So we're just glad to Edge Radio Network every Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Talk About Unity, because here at Edge Radio Network, truth still matters.
And we're back. Thank you once again for tuning in. This is When Opinions Collide, and I've been joined by Oscar Hines here, and we were kind of talking about the evils of slavery. I want to kind of just dovetail this right back into looking at the Chinese Communist Party and the way that they use and abuse people. They have, in fact, and America's been complicit in this. And we were talking about this over the break. I really am frustrated by folks who poke at America for slave trade that everyone took part in back in the day. Was it evil? Absolutely. Was it happening then all over? Unfortunately. Is it still happening today? Yes. Are we all complicit? Every time we buy made in China, every time we buy a Nike made by cute little children in Cambodia or Thailand, right? Do I relish or rebel in that? No. But that's one of the reasons why I think the Chinese Communist Party needs to be put to heel. And you look at, and one of the things that you said is, I don't remember if this was on show or not, but you said that there's been this hypocrisy where America kind of plays the line and say China's kind of the enemy. At the same time, under the table, we're taking money from them. Yeah. And I would argue that again, that is an immoral act to actually take money and run with it when you know that there is, if your business is being conducted via slave trade, not all business in China is, but I would say a lot of it is. Substantive amount is. It's immoral to profit off that. With that in mind, we see a lot of these Democrat politicians, Republicans, they are out there for sure. But you look at Biden, who's, we're talking millions and even billions of dollars from interest groups in Russia and in China. It's kind of scary that he's actually playing their ball with their playing their game with their ball, the Chinese virus, COVID-19, and now he's pushing the vaccine. What do you think about this conversation? I don't know if you heard about that, but there's this thing on social media about Vax the Blacks. If you're
wow, I didn't hear that.
If you're on welfare,
Vax the Blacks.
If you're on welfare, and they're going into minority communities, and you're going to have to take the vaccine if you want to remain on welfare. Just like if you want to remain on welfare, you can't have a together home. You have to split the home. We have to get rid of the man, and you can be paid for each baby you produce. Right. So much the same way. What's your take on that?
I think it's reprehensible. The problem that I have with this entire society, like I heard this, we're gonna make sure the vaccine gets to the underprivileged communities first. They're by and large the sufferers of this. Well, they're the sufferers because they have comorbidities. If you gave a damn, you would work on the comorbidity issue, not necessarily just forcing this vaccine. In our previous conversation with Sean, we were talking about this vaccine being so deleterious to the health. You know, it alters the DNA, and I'm sure you talked about some of that. So I think it's reprehensible. I think that if you said something interesting a little while ago about maybe 30 to 40,000, maybe 60,000 max actually had or died from COVID-19. The rest are all comorbidities and
gunshot wounds, car accidents.
So there's a money machine at work here, and it's driving this. This next economy is based on these pharmaceuticals, and it's being driven by this fear of COVID-19 as opposed to anything else. So I think this idea of vaccinating Black people, if they go back to Tuskegee and remember that they were being given syphilis and watched how they died over generations. And this only ended in the 70s. So for people who are like, oh, that's ancient history, you know, I was alive during the Tuskegee experiment, so I can testify to that. So all of this is pretty sick and maniacal, if you ask me.
And absolutely. And it's the same group of people that's been doing it. You know, you look at this group of folks who've been pushing since the Darwinian run, where
eugenics
people are eugenics. I mean, and you actually see people today who are still saying, it's not because they're black, but they're not as intelligent as some of the other races.
I'd like
it is
to.
genetic. Like you'll hear people say crap like that. But here's the thing: I want people who say that sort of thing to have the voice to say it.
Yeah.
That people like you and I can come along and say, "That's bull."
Yeah.
That's bull.
Yeah.
And here's why.
Yeah.
Here's why that is baloney. But here's the thing: we are losing that capacity. We're losing that potential in this country right now because we're going to a cancel culture. Look, they're taking down Lincoln now because he was. I don't know if you heard about that, but they're actually removing his name from schools because he was not an ally of the Native American. You have to look at people as flawed individuals. You look at every single person, historical person today, they are flawed sinners who are basically evil, saved only by restraining influence of God above. That is my opinion, and I believe it is backed by fact. You look at people, they're basically not moral creatures. You have to have an overarching standard, and a lot of times that is enforced by a bare bones minimum government. The Founding Fathers understood that. They wanted us to have the freedom to have these conversations. Now, you look at Lee. Lee was taken down, and we were saying, General Lee, that guy was actually not for slavery, but he was he grudgingly took up the capacity as general of the South because he wanted to protect his home state. Take that conversation however you will. He was a flawed guy, but when we saw Lee going down, we said, in Stonewall Jackson, we saw those statues coming down. We said, next there'll be Lincoln. It's not a slippery slope argument. It's happening right now. They're erasing our history like they do in communist China. This culture.
But I would say to you that blacks' history has never been presented.
Oh, sure.
You know, blacks have been, like I mentioned, the vaccination was invented by an African. There's so much of African contributions that have never been presented. I don't think any of those guys should be celebrated.
Education.
Screw those guys, in my opinion. I don't think if you rebelled against the United States of America in any capacity, you are not a hero. Period.
So, with that said, I would take that view. I think there's a lot of value with that view. Taking down monuments is what these people do. They remove your history so that you can't go back and look at that.
Yeah.
And just like there are black heroes who have not been trumpeted. By the way, the education system has been regularly run by the left. The people who've always been pushing that envelope, pushing that barrier. You look at the Democratic Party; they've been running that for over a century, rather. They've been pushing that, and they've constantly. By the way, who owns slaves primarily?
Oh, of course.
No,
the Democrats are no friends of blacks. I'm sorry.
And I'll roughly quote. I'll kind of ballpark quote. I don't remember the exact quote from Malcolm X, and I'll try to get the whole frame of it. He said, "If you believe the Democrat Party is your friend, you're a chump." By the way, he went on to say that if you think the Republican Party is any better, not by much. And by the way, I would actually agree with him on that. There are a lot of things I don't agree with Malcolm X on, but that's one of them. The parties are not your friends. They're self-interested bodies or groups that are looking to grab power.
Right.
Again, that's why I call myself a conservative Christian. I'm not a Republican.
Yeah.
I'm not aligned with that. I'm aligned with what I see as truth and what I believe to be absolute truth. When I am not aligned with that, I try to correct, constant course correction, because I'm a fallible human being. But we should all be seeking truth.
Yeah.
Not a party.
Yeah. The problem is truth has been convoluted. We're dealing with heads of the same snake, and that is probably why I think I am so cynical.
Both parties are heads of the same snake. I
Absolutely.
would agree.
Yeah.
And they're infested.
Yeah.
They're infested.
Right.
And that's why we have the situation right now where both parties are allowing the Chinese Communist Party to have influence over our nation. It's going to bring us down to heel. Like or hate Trump's rhetoric, by the way, 50-60% of his tweets, oh my goodness.
Sure.
If he was in the White House in January, you'd see the economy go back, freedom reigns. Joe Biden gets in, we're going to see 2022, 2024 lockdowns. It'll be time for civil disobedience, for us to say, forget these lockdowns, I'm going to church. Forget these lockdowns, I'm coming down to Edge Radio Studios at the Midtown Bar and Grill and going to enjoy a live show. I don't care. That will be the time to do that, because they are going to reduce your liberty. And at the end of the day, the most important value I think that there is, in fact, I would actually point to God himself, is free will.
Yeah.
The ability to choose. God would rather have you have the ability to choose than you to have eternal bliss with him versus eternal suffering without.
Mm-hmm.
God would rather you be able to choose. And I say it's always about having that opportunity to choose. Unfortunately, we're seeing a nation where you won't have that ability.
Yeah.
God help us all.
I tend to agree. In that regard, I tend to agree. Our freedoms right now are not only in peril, but it's imminent destruction for the freedoms that we have been afforded up until now. I agree.
Let's hope and pray that the evidence that's been brought forward so far has been ignored, seen. We can repair our election. Hopefully, we can get some healing in our nation. And I would really like to see a free January. But Mr. Hine, thank you so much for being on. Where can people reach you?
Oh, just go to ninjatalks.com or oscarhines.com.
You can find us at Opinions Collide on the Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us.